Well, hello and welcome to today's episode. We are talking about a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, given my own past experiences. So, we are talking about the high price, letting love in, the high price of being a strong, independent woman. And what we are going to cover is specifically uh, how and why this type or this archetype develops for women and the impact it has on your relationships, specifically your marriage, but also your relationship with yourself, your relationship with work. If you're new to me, I've been a practicing psychotherapist for 25 years. I had an in person practice for the first 20 up until COVID. And then I expanded online post 2020. And I work with couples and also women. I work with couples on their marriage, and I work with women who are struggling to get out of their head and into their body and really feel the love that their loving partner has to offer them. So, today, that is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be discussing just how this woman blocks the love from her hubby. And at the end, I will have a couple of invitations for you. So if you stick around, tune into that because I will have a gift for you and then also an invitation for another opportunity to go deeper with me. So let's dive in. Okay. So when we think about the strong, independent woman, uh, some of the things that come to mind are self sufficiency, a strong need for independence, a rejection of dependence, and ultimately there's an emotional isolation. So many people fear this idea of dependency. They sort of use that word interchangeably with codependence, and they're just not the same thing. So, in every healthy marriage, there is a healthy level of dependency between the two partners that we would call an interdependence. So, there's a shared interdependence as opposed to a codependence. And if we're going to have a long lasting, loving relationship that is sustainable over time, we need to feel needed. We need to feel useful. We need to feel like we can facilitate and help our partner. And we need to know that we are in this together. And self sufficiency and independence flies in the face of that. Now, I'm not saying that you should not have those attributes, but what I am saying is that there is there are certain places where the attributes that we possess, the personality attributes that we possess, work really well in some situations and don't work as well in other situations. And this is oftentimes the case for people at work. So, independence, self sufficiency, autonomy, there's certain careers where that's really important. Now, one still needs to be able to rely on and depend on a team or an assistant in order to be able to optimize your efficiency and not burn yourself out. But generally speaking, in the workforce, we see that those are high value qualities, especially in women who I find oftentimes are having to go above and beyond to really look and appear marketable. Unfortunately, that's the reality. So, a lot of times when I work with couples, there are certain traits that either partner has that works well in their job, but they bring it home. And boy, does it get in the way of the relationship, of the connection, of the intimacy. And so, independence, self sufficiency, those are ones that get in the way for women. So I'm going to be focusing this on when the woman is a self sufficient, independent, need to do everything myself kind of person, which was me previously. I identified as one of these women and one of those who just felt like I'm going to do it myself because no one can do it better, quicker, more efficient. or the way that I want it done. So I'm just going to do it myself. And this was the case at work. This was the case with my peers. This was the case anytime there was a group being formed with my colleagues. This is the case in my home, in my marriage, with my child. And let me tell you, I ran myself into the ground doing that and actually started to get very resentful. But really, I could only be resentful of myself because I was the one who was taking it all on. But I would project that resentment onto the others who weren't stepping up to do what I was doing. And they probably would have stepped up if I would have created the space. But this is what happens for women, is that you do it all yourself. So let's think about how this works at home. You do it all yourself, and then you are pissed off at your husband because he's not helping. And then when he does help, he doesn't help in the way that you want him to help. So you either take over and do it yourself, or you criticize him for how he's doing it. How do I know this? Because I've been there and I've worked with hundreds of clients who've been there. And then your husband just stops helping. And then that's when you start to feel resentful. It's like, well, he doesn't help. He doesn't do anything. And I'm going to argue that the reason he doesn't do anything is because he never really created the space for him to do anything. And he's got to be able to do it his way, not our way. So this is really where I see this taking a toll on marriages. And so oftentimes high performing women who are also leaning toward the type A, they're more perfectionistic, they're more detail oriented, they get the job done. You tend to also have a high degree of self-sufficiency. Now we see these being correlated with one another, but there's not necessarily a direct cause and effect. So you're managing everything, your career, your household, your social life. Maybe you're planning all the dates, you're planning the vacations, you're planning everything. And you send a message, well, I don't need you. So that is the message that you send. So whether it's to your colleagues, your peers, your team members, those that you manage, your partner, your kids, your extended family, the message you send is, I don't need anyone. I don't need your help. And so over time, people start to internalize that message and they stop offering to help, or they give you sort of like a loose half offer, like, oh, let me know if you need anything. Well, of course you don't need anything. You're not going to say I need something, right? So what happens though over time, so there's a progression here that we see. And what begins to happen over time is that this state of mind that you are operating in starts to lead to feelings of emotional distance and isolation from your partner. And so where you might come home from work, be prepping dinner, sitting at the table, having dinner with your family, but your mind is elsewhere because you have a dozen things on your to-do list. And so you're trying to remember them. And then maybe you run to your phone and you're like, oh, I just need to write this down. And your husband's like, we're eating dinner. And you're like, I know, but I don't want to forget this thing. And so you go and you put it on your phone, or you don't use your phone and you have a million sticky notes all over the place because you have so much swirling and you're just trying to manage it all, as opposed to delegating, right? Wow, that's a novel idea. So what happens in the marriage, so I'm going to bring this to the marriage now. What happens in the marriage is that husbands actually start to feel undervalued, unnecessary, not needed. When men have partners who are overly self-sufficient, overly independent, men start to feel not needed. And then when he tries to help and he gets criticized or corrected for how he's helping, he's going to start to withdraw. That makes men feel emasculated. I talk about this a lot because high-performing type A women, without realizing it, can so easily make their hubbies feel emasculated. And the reality is that that's a strong trigger for men. It unleashes a rage in them that you may never have seen. So we want to think about how not only it's important to have your individual identity in a marriage, but it's also important to have your joint identity. So the way I think about marriage is, if you think about an old Venn diagram, two circles and there's an overlap in the middle. So each outer side of the circle is each partner, partner A, partner B. The inner part of the circle where the two circles overlap is the couple. So there's three entities there. There's partner A, partner B, and then there's the couple. And what happens with with people when they are too independent, too self-sufficient, is that there's not enough overlap or no overlap. So there's no entity creating the couple. There's no shared experience. There's no, I'm lifting you up, you're lifting me up. We're making each other better as a couple and as individuals. And over time, the other partner starts to feel like they don't really need me. And they actually start to withdraw and grow resentment as well. So what happens is we need to really start to then think about, okay, so what is the point and purpose of me leading with this personality attribute, this high degree of self-sufficiency? Because if it's not facilitating something at home, then it's not needed and we need to let it go. What's really difficult, though, about that for many women is that is embedded in who you are. But let me tell you, that is changeable. We are able to change that. We are able to make shifts in that. And so for me, I would say I started that shift about 10 years ago because that was leading up to my peak burnout years where I was doing everything. I mean, I was really a leader and a facilitator in many of the professional peer groups that I was a part of. I also was the leader of my home and managing a business, and didn't really take much help in that, or any help really, if I'm being totally honest. And so this really started with a conversation for me with myself, and then led to a conversation with my husband about mental load. I have other episodes about that, but really beginning to talk about sharing the mental load in the household when I really realized that I just couldn't keep doing this anymore. And ultimately, what I noticed was that the more independent and self sufficient I was, the greater the message I sent to my husband that I didn't need him. And the more he stopped um, being useful and feeling needed. And this drove a wedge between us in our connection. Okay, so it was part of what started to drive a big wedge between my husband and I 10 plus years ago. So it started 10 plus years ago. It was about 10 years ago when I started making a shift. And women whose minds are organized this way, I'm not going to say you're wired this way because there's a shift, but women whose minds are organized this way feel a lot of things. Like, you feel this pressure to stick to your rigid routines. You feel this pressure to be perfect, make sure everything is going right. And what happens is it you lose the spontaneity, you lose the play in your relationship. You become all work, no play. You become very stoic. And if you have a partner who likes to play, who's very adventurous, like my partner, the relationship can start to feel very deadened. And that was really what my husband and I started to experience. And when I work with couples, this is a common complaint I will say about husbands regarding their wives, is that they don't laugh anymore. They can't laugh the way when they did when I first met them. They don't play anymore. I try to make jokes, or I'm like, hey, I try to be silly. And the things I used to do that used to make her laugh, she doesn't laugh anymore. She looks at me like I'm annoying, like I'm a nuisance. And this makes men feel terrible about themselves, as it would anyone, of course. And so what we then see over time is that these feelings start to lead to a great degree of resentment and dissatisfaction in marriage. And then you wake up one day, someday, wondering, like, gosh, is this all there is? Is this it? I mean, I feel like we're roommates. And if this also happens to occur around the same time that you're in midlife, when people are, generally speaking, starting to do an evaluation of, okay, I'm in midlife somewhere halfway through my life ish. Am I happy with where I'm going? You know, I look back on where I've been, I assess where I am today, and I reflect on where I'm going. Am I happy with that? And this is the point at which we start to see people make big, drastic shifts in their life because they're not happy. And if you are a woman who is living a life extremely independently and self sufficiently, I'm going to say you're probably also feeling emotionally isolated. And if you're feeling emotionally isolated, so is your husband. And therefore, your marriage is probably experiencing a big disconnect and a loss of vitality and liveliness. And so, it is very important that you start to think about this now before you get to this point where I say to couples, there is a point of no return for couples. And you don't really know that you're there until you're there. And this is one of the things that when couples come and they work with me, as if they think they might be there, that is one of the first things we assess is how salvageable is this relationship? And can we get back to what we had, but better? And so that is really one of the pieces that we're looking at. But for you, the woman who is struggling with this, and it is just wreaking havoc on your life, your mood, your mental health, your physical health, your marriage, your family, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with yourself, then I have something special for you. So the first thing is if you want to DM me your email, I will send you my menu of regulation resources. And so this is really what this work is about. This work is really about learning how to regulate your system so that you can get your system out of overdrive, out of the need for striving for perfection, getting things done, doing all of the things. There's a heightened sense there. So regulation resources are a way to begin to regulate your system so that you could start to feel more grounded, more calm, and ultimately not feel the need to do all of these things and operate at this very high level. So that's number one. Number two, I am getting ready to open up and publicly launch my upcoming signature group program for this woman. And I have not publicly launched it yet, but it is currently on pre-sale pricing. So if that is something you're interested in, send me a DM and write pre-sale and we'll talk about it. It is a 4-month group. It is for the woman who's an overthinker, overanalyzer, type A, and you can't get out of your head. And it is completely wreaking havoc on your relationship with your husband and your life in general. And you would love to finally rid yourself of the overthinking, overanalyzing type A, which I'm also going to say is driven by a lot of anxiety. So you want to get out of your head and into your body. You can DM me pre-sale and I will discuss with you all the details for that program. That is it for today. I will see you in the next episode.